Brown dwarf aliens with brown skin. Characteristics. Extraterrestrials referred to as brown dwarfs are described as being short with wide faces and having plump and stocky bodies. They are normally reported as being approximately 4 feet tall, and they almost always wear something to cover or conceal the shape of their heads, such as a hood or a draped piece of fabric. Some wear dark brown padded, tight-fitting body suits, which makes it possible to observe that parts of their bodies have thick folds of skin in certain areas. Other reports describe them wearing coveralls. Like the greys with whom they are most often seen, brown dwarfs are telepathic. The faces of the brown dwarfs are wide, with broad noses, and their lips are very thick. Their eyes are dark brown and maintain perspective with respect to the size of their other facial features. Their pupils have been described as both black and near white and horizontally positioned. Their skin, which has prominent folds in certain areas, is most often described as dark brown to nearly black. Of the publicly available reports, 1 describes their skin as yellow-brown and 2 describe their skin as blue. More about the potential misnomer of blue skin is described in the section of this site covering the blues as well as later in this document. Brown dwarfs exhibit emotion and at times have been described as acting silly, giggling, smiling with a sinister smile, and even hobbling as if attempting to dance. They, like some of the short greys, also appear to move in unison, but as if marching in a hobbling manner in a single file rather than in a graceful hopping skipping floating manner as certain greys appear to be. One report describes the brown dwarfs as wearing a round, clear space helmet similar to what our astronauts wear in space. That particular brown dwarf was also described as wearing a dark-colored bodysuit that had a tether attached to it while it was floating in an area of its craft with low gravity. Other reports include brown dwarfs with black unkempt hair or wearing what appeared to be wigs. Brown dwarfs are most often seen performing tasks within for the greys and gray apparent tan ETs. These tasks are described by some abductee experiencers as menial, and because of this, some people believe they are not very high in the gray hierarchy, but this may be an error. Due to the variations in their activities, it would appear the greys rely on the brown dwarfs to perform several different jobs, including but not limited to, guiding the experiencer to the examination room, prepping the subject, and assisting in the extraction of sperm from males by the use of a procedure that is not too dissimilar from a BBSE, preparing for other types of experimental procedures, including administering specific fluids, possibly even chemicals that abductee experiencers must drink, and then performing tests and procedures on them. They also seek out specific humans for the collection of their DNA, and they've been seen in human hybrid nurseries assisting and tending to newborns. In many respects, brown dwarfs are nearly as involved in the abduction process, including the creation of human hybrid children, as the greys. Brown dwarfs have also been seen in large groups in auditoriums, like school settings or instruction settings, wearing what the HR team believes are school uniforms that appear as different colored capes with hoods. These teaching environments sometimes involve young brown dwarfs viewing abductee experiencers on a stage as if they are being introduced, observed, and studied. The color of their apparent student uniform apparel is described as dark blue, red, or black, depending on the level and/or area of study they are engaged in. They have also been characterized as being in charge of organizing and orchestrating specific time events, as have the greys with whom they work. Other examples of brown dwarf activities. Brown dwarfs, like the tall greys, appear to enforce and perhaps even alter the human timeline when they deem it necessary. Time-related or time travel events have been published previously in books written by experienced writers. This is believed to be rare because their activities have to be extremely exact so as not to accidentally change any major events. One veteran described it like this. There were 3 events. The time event durations were approximately 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and 90 minutes. The first event began at approximately 11:30 p.m. and required us to go backward 30 minutes prior to the next event occurs. The second time event required us to go back 30 minutes again, for a total of 60 minutes. Then we had to go Forward? 90 minutes, so that when the 90-minute event occurred, it would be a different day. It had to be done in that exact order so we'd get to the correct day and not miss a day or be a day late in getting back. During a one-time event, I saw two scientists working with very advanced technology. It reminded me of Star Trek technology, and the two scientists were working quite desperately on a problem. There was going to be an explosion that would be very bad because there were also chemicals that had the potential to be released. I heard them talking about how they would contain 4 tall bullet-shaped cylinders of chemicals during the explosion. This was very fluid, it changed rapidly. They looked up and saw me, and I left their time at that point. During the next time event, I was given information over what I perceived to be a recorded device similar to a radio or TV, but it wasn't either of those. I listened to the information, which explained my time traveling. While I was listening, I was telling myself I would remember the time travel events and would write them down when I was able to get back. The 90-minute time event involved the chubby Browns and other abductees and was more involved. We were taken to a holding area that everyone saw as the inside of a church, but it was really their ship. We left the area together because we were aware of what was really happening and that we were involved in an abduction. When we got out of that large area on their ship, we witnessed several Browns line up and then get situated into square cubbyhole-like areas on their ship. They had to strap themselves in before the ship took off again. They had on dark brown padded body suits. Another experiencer is decidedly less neutral. After this, I saw 4 aliens. They were all short. One had a flattened head and appeared to me to be one of the short brown aliens with strange skin, but it looked more like something in one of Mr. Chase's illustrations, like that flat-headed entity. When I saw them enter the small room I was in, I recognized all of them. They were all short, and I liked the flat-headed one the least. There was a lady and another man with light hair, 4 aliens in all. A military man was with me in there too. I don't remember much, but when they were leaving the room, I saw that one of the blonde aliens was wearing tight white pants, and as they left the room, I lifted my left foot and sort of pushed him, her, or it out with my foot. They didn't fall down, but I had no respect for them and I wanted them out. I then walked over to the flat-headed alien and said, "I know this is your entire fault, you are the one behind this who is responsible." As I spoke, I bent down to hold his face in my hands, and as I was speaking, he transformed into my son, and I became unsure and immediately let go because I didn't want to hurt him. On one level, I knew it wasn't my son, but I couldn't be sure. That's how good their telepathy is sometimes. On one level, you know who they are, but on another, they place doubt in your mind and you're not sure, so in order to be sure, you are forced to believe it's really someone you love and care about. They do this when we get too aggressive, so we won't harm them. A medical procedure was performed on the subject's brain. I was in a room with one of the short brown types. She was about 4 feet tall and waddled when she walked. She had brown skin, a chubby face, and short black hair. In a way, she reminded me of a short, elderly black woman and a short, elderly Oriental woman. I was sitting in a chair and this woman kept waddling in and out. She was coming and going from the room. She'd come and fiddle with my head or my hair. When she was across the room and entered the room, I could see her, but when she got close to me, she made me think she was giving me a special haircut, a pompadour, and at the same time, I would get something from her mind, something about medicine. She needed medicine for the babies. They seemed desperate. The medicine was being created by me. I don't know if she took something out of my brain or not, but at one point, I felt the top of my head and there was a portion of my hair that didn't feel natural. It was like a part of my hair had been pulled backward, like maybe even part of my scalp had been pulled backward, and she was doing something there, something in there. Searching for specific types of DNA. A final example comes from a well-known case, and some people may be familiar with it already, but it underscores one of the reasons these beings are abducting humans, the collection of specific types of DNA in order to help their infants and children survive. In this case, it is unknown if the child the abductee experiencer saw had been born this way or had been severely injured. An odd-shaped craft with lots of protrusions landed on the property adjacent to ours in an open area in a field of grass. I was sure they landed there because they knew they would be safe and no one would see them except me. I walked through a little section of woods on our property and then onto the property adjacent to ours. Several people came out of the craft, and I realized they represented several different nationalities and appeared to be from different countries. They all had drugged looks on their faces as if they were mentally turned off. The one female being I saw clearly was short and pudgy with wrinkled skin and appeared to be malformed, or at least, was very strange looking. She had vivid blue eyes. I did not see a pupil like ours, but rather a white pupil that was shaped like a horizontal slit. She had dark hair that was long and tousled. She was telepathic, and when I was looking at her, I felt I had to keep my thoughts from her because she was so difficult to look at. There was a young man who appeared to be in his late 20s standing next to her, and he may have in fact been a hybrid. He was almost physically sick simply from being in her presence. He could hardly look at this being and he appeared as if he was on the verge of both crying and vomiting. This female told me that all of the people, apparently other abductee experiencers, I saw there had to have their blood or DNA tested because they were looking for something very specific that they needed from us. This being then showed me a baby who looked grossly deformed. When I first saw it, it looked like it might be a smaller twin of the female being that was attached to her stomach, but part of it was concealed underneath her clothing, so I couldn't be certain. Its face was red as if it had been burned, and I found it amazing that it was still alive. This baby appeared to be in dire circumstances and was suffering. It was so very, very sad. It is clear from these examples that the brown dwarfs work with other species, namely the greys, and they are also searching for particular types of human DNA, not to mention apparently performing medical experiments or at least medical procedures on abductee experiencers for various reasons, some of which we can only guess. We would like to make one more observation about the last example involving the infant brown dwarf, when the young man or hybrid appeared to be on the verge of becoming physically sick simply from being in her presence, and could hardly look at this being and appeared as if he was on the verge of both crying and vomiting. One might conclude something quite different from what this particular abductee experiencer thought. The HR team believes he was acting this way because he was extremely worried, near hysterical, about the young infant who was in dire physical shape and possibly even death. The HR team suspects this likely explains his behavior if he was the infant's hybrid father or perhaps even the human father of the baby. It has been documented that advanced stage hybrids exhibit human emotions and behaviors, and we believe this is a logical assumption that should be considered. Brown or blue? The following discussion is presented as a possible explanation for the color blue being reported in association with brown dwarf skin tone. The HR team has the highest regard for Mr. Strieber, and we are in no way attempting to redefine Whitley Strieber's memories or interpretation of his own encounters, but we feel this is an important case to revisit for a few reasons. In his first book, titled Communion, Whitley Strieber's short beings donning the coveralls appeared to have brown skin. However, in the movie version of Communion, these beings were shown to have blue skin, as the image above shows. In Transformation, his second book on the subject of alien abductions, Whitley Strieber revisits the brown dwarfs in the narrative below. If one understands the beings' telepathic proclivities and their many decades of experience with human psychology, sociology, and behavior, and how these concepts, along with a human's individual life experiences, combine to make humans the individuals we are, then the following dialogue can be understood in more than one way. Strieber writes, "I was simply there, in the real world, and the real world was the curving corridor and the two dark blue beings that were leading me along. They were really very, very blue. The color was doubly startling because it was a living hue, as rich with subtle complexity as the color of any flesh. I blurted out the first thought that popped into my mind. 'You're blue.' One of them looked back over his shoulder when I spoke. He had a broad, flat face that almost seemed to grimace at me, so wide was the mouth. He fluttered the heavy lids on his deep, shining eyes and said, "We used to be like your blacks, but we decided this was better." That face was as sinister as anything I had ever seen, and yet the feeling of twinkling good humor was so strong that I almost wanted to laugh. I felt ridiculous. I've never thought of myself as a racist, but that comment brought into sharp focus my own unacknowledged attitudes about the differences between white and black people. It is apparent the two brown dwarfs telepathically honed in on Strieber's thoughts and were acutely aware of his emotions during this exchange. It seems almost as if they went out of their way to make their skin appear very blue rather than dark brown or yellow-brown as he had seen it and remembered it originally. If you recall, Whitley remembered their skin color consciously and then recalled it yet again as brown or yellow-brown during his hypnosis session with his therapist. It is not until this exchange and interaction approximately 1 year later that he now sees them as having blue skin. That, coinciding with their telepathic comments to him, "We used to be like your blacks, but we decided this was better," explains a lot about the situation and what might have really been occurring. Their awareness of our deepest thoughts and beliefs is possible due to their telepathic nature. It is the HR team's belief that if it was not directly related to the lighting on board their craft, the brown dwarfs made themselves appear to have blue skin for Whitley's sake, perhaps to make him feel more comfortable by making their presence easier to handle, i.e., more humorous for him. Of course, another possibility exists as well, and that has to do directly with race. Brown dwarfs have certain facial features, albeit very exaggerated, that appear similar to some Africans and some African Americans, those being the broad nose and thick lips and, no doubt, the color of their skin. Due to constant abductions and re-abductions, they may have developed sensitivities to certain humans' feelings and beliefs towards them. We all filter our view of others through our life experiences, and it is indeed possible these beings decided to appear to have blue skin, a tactic called screen imagery or camouflage response, or they could have even been wearing the equivalent of blue makeup in order to soften their features or redirect Whitley's focus from the brown color of their skin and their features. We are not attempting to make direct comparisons between Africans or African American blacks or brown-skinned humans and the brown dwarfs. We are only speaking to limited physical features that the human mind might make a comparison with. After all, since we are humans and brown dwarfs are aliens, it is psychologically sound for the human mind to attempt to find something with which they can compare what they are remembering and seeing. This is not unlike Barney Hill's, an African American, first impression of the aliens he saw when he described them as appearing like Nazis. He was not implying that humans with white or light-colored skin in possession of advanced technology are all Nazis. He was merely expressing a normal psychological response and making a good comparison to the immediate and terribly frightening situation he suddenly found himself in when first encountering light-skinned extraterrestrial humanoids and their apparent menacing gaze when they looked at him. The brown dwarfs work in concert with the Greys and are intimately involved in the abduction and processing of abductee experiencers. They are described by some as performing menial tasks, but they are not by any means unskilled or boring, as we can clearly see from the narratives we have examined in this document. We hope these examples provide a clearer understanding of the brown dwarfs. These are by no means the only examples of interaction between humans and brown dwarfs, so we encourage you to seek and help educate others about the contact that is occurring on our planet.